It's great to see you all here today. We are 6-year-old. It's our 6th foundation day of Pune International Center. We have gone through the terrible 2s, terrible 3s. It's almost like starting the primary schooling in the with 6-year-old. But we are growing and growing well. And hence it's a very, very special program as a foundation day. Earlier today, we conducted a Vichar Spardha. Some of you attended that program. This part of the program is about the Foundation Day lecture. We're very, very honored that Mr. Haseeb Drabu, the Minister of Finance, Culture, Labor and Employment of Jammu and Kashmir is here with us today. So a round of applause for Hon'ble Minister. It gives all of us a sense of pride that Honorable Minister has come to Pune just to attend this program and grace the occasion as part of the 6th Foundation Day program today. I'm not going to take much time here. To begin with, may I request Dr. Raghunath Mashulkar, President of Pune International Center, to give his opening remarks and talk about the 6 years of Pune International Center. Sir.
Shri Haseeb Drabu, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Culture, Labor and Employment, Jammu and Kashmir, Dr. Vijay Kedkar, distinguished members of our family of Pune International Center, ladies and gentlemen. I want to extend a very, very warm welcome to you all on our Foundation Day. As Prashant mentioned, this is Pune International Center's 6th Foundation Day. It has been a great journey, and I will refer to it very shortly and very briefly. But first of all, I wish to extend a very special welcome to our Honorable Chief Guest. Dr. Vijay Kedkar will chair the session and he will introduce him formally. But sir, may I say I have been one of your great admirers. I'm not an economist, but I have been amazed at what you have been able to achieve, and your presence here means so much to us. To begin with, I wish to pay my homage to somebody who is missing from here, Dr. Dilip Padgaonkar. And I remember exactly the last Foundation Day, I was sitting exactly around where you are sitting, and Dilip was sitting next to me. We miss him. In fact, I was just showing a photograph where young children who participated in that competition surrounded us all, and I have a wonderful photograph with Dilip and me being surrounded. I'm going to tweet it tonight, by the way. Do look at it at Ramesh Mashel. We really miss him for the great contributions that he has made to Pune International Center, having helped us in achieving the kind of dreams that we had ourselves. I miss him also for another reason, and that is because our chief guest, Jammu and Kashmir, and you all know how deeply Dilip was involved as an interlocutor in Jammu and Kashmir. I am sure you would have loved to be here to listen to you, to talk to you and so on. Very quickly, it to you again. Our basic idea is to be a think tank, Vichar Manthan Kendra. We move by doing a dialogue, like the Pune dialogue on national security that we had a few days ago. Dialogue, documentation, then dissemination very widely by using all means. Engagement with people who matter, influencing them in terms of policy, and just for Honorable Minister's information, there have been several policy papers, right from smart cities to sanitation to corporate governance, which Pune International Center has produced, which have influenced government thinking and the entire policy dialogue. I don't mind mentioning something which I did in my concluding remarks, because it is rather remarkable. You know, life is so interesting. We had this Pune dialogue on national security, and there were great thought leaders from across Afghanistan, China, UK, Japan, America, sitting right here. That was one of the programs that we had. And today, we had another set of thought leaders. And they were young children from rural villages, from the remotest corner. And Vijay and I were talking while sitting there. We learned so much from them. Not in terms of the great idea that they had on agriculture of the future, but the way they thought, the problem that they thought about, their heart being in the right place, and the utter honesty. I was just mentioning to the Honorable Minister that one of the girls, she got a huge applause to what she said, and immediately thereafter she said, no, but that's not my sentence. It is of somebody else's. Utter honesty, you know. So I think it is absolutely incredible, but it also gives you a sense of the diversity of program that we do in thought leadership, whether it is thought leaders from UK or US or thought leaders from children from villages, and that platform we create. I also remember Dilip today because he always used to remind us, it is not Pune International Center, it is International Center in Pune. And that international nationalization is something that became clear when we talked about PDNS. And based on the follow-up action that have taken place and the communication that Dr. Vijay Karkar has received, as a matter of some of the best in the world, now we want to create partnerships with us. So we are really living up to the name, the desire to become an international center. Two more things. We always think of India. India first, India matters to us, we want to matter to India. So what are the current problems that India has? So whether our policy papers, briefs, last year for example on making India, containing black money, the possible policy mechanisms getting corrected, the trade policy, etc. These are all sort of important issues that we do. One of the biggest challenges that we are going to have is jobs. And we're scared about jobless growth because, you know, we talk about the demographic advantage. It can be demographic disaster if that doesn't happen. And therefore, again, it was Dr. Vijay Karkar's brainchild that we should have discussion on this. 8 and 9 December, we are having a major conference on accelerating growth through employment. And again, we are getting some of the leading scholars, policy makers in this. So we just don't want to be relevant, but we want to be ahead of the curve, so as to say, as far as economic goes. I would also say that one is particularly proud about one form of innovation, social innovation, in which we have taken leadership. For example, the National Conference on Social Innovation. We have created, after that, a Social Innovation Forum, and this is something very important, that the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, they approached us, as a matter of fact, because they want to talk about social entrepreneurship, create policies about on social entrepreneurship, including the definition of social entrepreneurship. You remember we discussed, and we had a fantastic meeting, and so on and so forth. So we are connecting. So both excellence and relevance matters as far as great institutions are concerned. So we are trying to create standards of excellence, but at the same time be relevant to national issues, international issues. Finally, one must say that with 187 founder members, 174 life members, honorary fellows, which include all the living Bharat Ratnas, 40 institutional members, how many corporate leaders? 11 corporate members, all the leading enterprises of the country. We feel that we have created a solid foundation, but we have a long way to go, because we have set very tall benchmarks for us. There's a tough course ahead, but I'm quite sure the well wishes and the hard work of the members, the various committee members, the collaborating partners, I must make mention especially for them, like today's meeting we had, again in partnership with Madam Prabodhini, as knowledge partner, again with Gyanki, who gave access to those villages. That is how we could get 51,000 entries. So we are leveraging all the time with these partners. So it's my duty to thank all of them, thank all of you on this 6th Foundation Day. So happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now to introduce Honorable Mantri ji, may I request another great economist, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, sir.
Shri Haseeb, Drabu, the Hon'ble Finance Minister of J&K, Dr. Mashilkar, President of PIC, Prashant Girmani, our Director, the trustees of the PIC and distinguished members and the guests. It's my great privilege and honor to introduce our distinguished speaker this evening, Shri Haseeb Drabu. Haseeb Drabu received his education in one of the leading universities of India. He studied at Jawaharlal University. And then he worked, in fact he was on the editorial board of Hindustan Times and also Business Standard. But more importantly, he was a very important and very thoughtful macroeconomic critique of government policies, and both everyone read very avidly. All people sitting in Delhi, that time used to live in Bombay, and we used to read him very avidly because he would get a very astute analysis and of the monetary policy and the macroeconomics. Later on, he came to Delhi. He was working in the finance, first in the Planning Commission, later on with Prime Minister Economic Council, and then he also was economic advisor to the 10th Finance Commission, worked with Mr. K.C. Pant, who was that time the chairman of the Finance Commission. And that was perhaps the most innovative Finance Commission, and that's the all credit goes to Haseeb of that report. And after that, he shifted to corporate world. He became chairman of J&K Bank, which was a fledgling bank, but within 3 to 4 years it remained as the most dynamic bank of private bank in India, most sought after by both FIIs and domestic investors. And then of course he was drawn into politics and now is the finance minister of J&K. He was also one of the architects of finally sort of acceptance of GST. As a finance minister of J&K, he chaired also the committee of finance ministers, state finance ministers. And if you look at what he's doing in J&K, in implementation of GST is really ahead of everybody. For instance, he's already going to include real estate in GST, which would make a major dent on black money, on black economy. So it's really with great pleasure. Let me invite Shri Haseeb Drabu, the Finance Minister of J&K and future Finance Minister of India.
Good evening. Thank you. As always, very generous. Before I start, I'd like to echo the sentiments of Dr. Mashlekar in remembering Dilip, who was a very dear friend. And in fact, first, after I'd spoken to Dr. Kelkar, who's more like a mentor for me, the email I got was from Dilip inviting me for this foundational lecture, and I think about a fortnight after that, came the shocking news of his death. So it was wonderful to have Dilip here, and I do hope that what I say today would be something that Dilip would have liked, and in fact he was the exception to some of the things that I'm going to talk about. Very, very honored to be here, the foundation lecture, and what is listed is the growth prospects of J&K. I'm not quite so sure if I want to talk about that on a Sunday afternoon. Also at a time when growth is looking very elusive in all parts of the country. What I would want to do today is to really talk about J&K as it is now, and in some way heighten the awareness about J&K. And are we going to carry this forward for the next 70 years as we have for the last 70 years? It's very rare to find a gathering like this of thinkers, intellectuals, academicians, policymakers who actually take time off on a Sunday afternoon to listen to about things in J&K. So I want to give a certain snapshot, and then I'll be very happy to take questions on related issues. 370, 35A, which is currently donning the headlines. I don't want to get into the history of J&K and what has happened in terms of the last 70 years, but I want to bring two snapshots to your mind. First, more like a fact sheet. If you go back 1951, J&K, what is the fact sheet? The fact sheet, I'll give you 10 very simple points that give you a sense of where we started and where we are today. And probably leave around that some understanding of J&K. The Constitution of India gave J&K special rights. What were these rights? I'll just discuss 10 of them. The first, to have its own constitution. No other state in the country had its own constitution. Own, separate, special constitution. Known as the Constitution of J&K. Number 2, own Prime Minister. Number 3, own President, Sadr Riyasat. Number 4, national flag, separate. Number 5, residuary powers to the state assembly. Unlike any other state, the residuary powers rest with the Parliament of India. Number 6, state subjects, not citizens of India. Legislatively. State subjects, separate. Number 7, entry of Indian citizens, restricted. Had to take a permit. Entry of goods into J&K, had to go through customs duty. Supreme Court, no jurisdiction. Highest court of the land, High Court of J&K. And more within my domain, J&K had complete and exclusive rights of taxation, control over all taxes. Even the income tax law didn't apply. So in some ways, it was a sovereign within a sovereign. These were the three basic things which actually, if you look at it historically speaking, every state had signed the same instrument of accession. But however, in the case of J&K, it got converted into an article within the constitution. Other states, it moved on. And remember, this was a time, we're talking of 1948-50, when the mantra was federal in form and unitary in spirit. The whole idea of one country which is getting reinvented in a different way, and the federations were not that powerful. And this was indeed a requirement of our times, a fledgling nationhood, the whole desire to bring in these things, the nature of economic policy. And within that, J&K was a special state, even as compared to the northeastern states. Now, when you look back at it in 2017, what are the 10 things, what has happened to those 10 things? The Constitution of J&K stays, but hugely truncated. The Assembly of J&K, which owns the Constitution of J&K in some way, has been disempowered to amend the Constitution of J&K. So honestly speaking, what is the point of having a Constitution if you can't amend it? The rights to amend this Constitution. So I would say truncated Constitution. Prime Minister converted into a Chief Minister. President becomes a governor. The national flag becomes a state flag. Customs duty abolished. Citizenship extended. Jurisdiction of Supreme Court complete. Taxes at par with everybody else. And free entry for individuals. So now you look at the two things, and in some way, this is the process of integration. Controversial, debatable, in some quarters questionable, but nevertheless, the process of integration has resulted in this transition. And there are many things that will go associated with it. One big element which I would want to point out in that phase, which goes from 1951 to perhaps 65, 67, is a strategy which I call corruption as a mode of cohesion. You push in money, try to make it so that, this whole thing, the integration process is done within those parameters. Speeches in Parliament of the Prime Minister of India talking about binding Kashmiris in chains of gold. Does it matter if it's a chains of gold or iron? It doesn't matter, chains are chains, nevertheless. But what I'm saying is that the whole process. And in some way, what you're seeing today, what is loosely put as alienation, has been engendered by this move. Of how it was done, we can get into specifics of it, but the point I want to make here is not this, it's different. Because the J&K model of sovereignty, or shared sovereignty, or pooled sovereignty, or whatever, happened at a time, as I said, when India as a union dominated India as a federation, conceptually speaking. The whole mindset of everybody, just government and everybody else with that. And as I said, at that time there were compulsions of building a nation of a certain kind. There were pressures of a new economic policy, which was inspired by a certain control regime, and the whole pervasive powers of the center came not from just the political of it, but also the economic. And of course, aided by the civil services. But now, when you look back at it from 2017, lots of things have changed. Starting with, let's say, if I were to go back to 1991, the whole phase of economic reforms in India, liberalization, had a huge impact on how the federalism in this country, the empowerment of the states. A couple of years later, another big event happens in terms of the 73rd, 74th Amendment to the Constitution, which is the Panchayati Raj and whatever. And in 2017, the GST comes in. All in some ways, where in GST we now have the finance minister who presented a budget which I talked about and said is the first federal budget of post-independent India. Such overwhelming influence did the states have in his budget. And the whole expenditure decentralization, 3.5 lakh crores being given to panchayats, is probably the biggest democratization of public expenditure that has ever happened anywhere in the world, let alone the country. All these trends that happen, liberalization, Panchayati Raj, now GST, where we actually have pooled sovereignty of the center. Today, a small tax change in cigarettes, or for that matter, any other good or exemption. And I remember one particular GST Council meeting where there was a 15 to 20 minute discussion on the dried fish in Manipur. Should it be taxed or not taxed? And the Finance Minister of India has to do a video conference call with state finance ministers about changing the rates. And Mr. Kelkar was that time in the thick of all this, 1991, when the entire nature of economic regime in India was changed. The state finance ministers must have read it in the next day's newspaper. There was no question of any consultation, no question of any discussion about it. And today, we have that a tax rate to be changed in the manner of cigarettes, automobile, cars. First a video conference happens, then GST Council meeting happens, and then it's done. So in some ways, Centre has given up its sovereignty in these matters. So have states. As Finance Minister of J&K, I was fully empowered to exempt a whole lot of categories, handicrafts or whatever. Now I have to go to the council. The point I'm trying to make is that in this period, as we stand in 2017, the notion of sovereignty, the notion of pooling has come in. It's not 1948, 49 or 50. Does this give us an opportunity to relook some of our things that we have been thinking about on J&K? Because with the rise to dominance of state governments, regional parties, I think one of the models that has emerged in recent times is how in every state there is a coalition between a regional party and a national party. To take a look at any state, you'll find this. And this actually is an indication of the rise to dominance of the state governments. It's also not quite unrelated that for the first time we have a Prime Minister who actually spent 12 years as Chief Minister. We've had two brief in between, but otherwise the Chief Ministers haven't graduated to become power of federalism. Rather than an aberration in our unitary system that needs to be demolished. I think that's the key question I wanted to pose. I have three questions or 3 points I want to make. One of them is this, that we have now seen that there is a certain spirit of federalism that is coming, as I was pointing out in the budget. You can see it in the articulations of the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the way institutions in this country have come. I think GST Council is India's first federal institution, genuinely speaking. Planning Commission was not. It was a part of a very, what I call a coercive federalism. So we have moved from a coercive federalism towards a cooperative federalism. Maybe in a few years, very competitive federalism. But I'm looking 10 years from now and saying that, is it possible to build on a model of empowered federalism? In the earlier phase, in 1950s, J&K was seen as an aberration. You can't have an enclave of federalism in a unitary structure. But today, when there is much greater action, power, articulation happening at the regional level, can we relook at this? And it'll change the way we think about J&K. Because one of the biggest failures has been that we have not linked the issue of J&K to larger trends in either Indian democracy, federalism. We have seen it in isolation, and I have more to say on this a little later. If we do this, are we then going to see a certain way of addressing what is in mainstream media and policy thinking on Kashmir talked about as political alienation? So is there a certain route that may emerge from here? So that is the first point I want to make. Having said that, the more important point that I want to make today to this gathering is that it is the Indian civil society's social disengagement from the people of J&K that I see at the core of the problem. And I'm very glad that I'm speaking to non-governmental people here, people who belong to India's civil society. Then more than political alienation, it is the social disengagement of the larger Indian civil society which needs to be addressed. We have words like radicalization, polarization within the state of J&K, and we try to address these. Those are subsets of a much larger issue. And this social disengagement is a natural corollary of what I think is the national/Indian intellectuals' apathy towards J&K. And I'll give examples on this from one field, which is academics. J&K has had the finest, most radical land reforms in the country, in fact anywhere else in the world, done by a non-communist regime in 1951, non-compensatory, associated with debt write-offs. The most comprehensive land reforms anywhere in the world, much ahead of West Bengal and Kerala. Yet, Find me a book on land reforms in Kashmir. You will find hundreds of them on land reforms in Kerala, land reform in West Bengal. What happened? Why is there no scholar from anywhere, from among the many universities that I have studied in, ever found it worth his while to talk about how land reforms took place in J&K and what kind of social change brought about, what kind of political change brought about? What are the implications of it? You will find as many books on Kerala as you will not find number of lines written on this. Panchayati Raj, way before 7th Amendment, before the 73rd 7th Amendment, a robust institutional system of Panchayati Raj, never acknowledged in the rest of the country anywhere. Close to home, let's talk of Pune. The Gokhale Institute, wonderful institute. When I was a student, one of the high points of his career was to come here and visit the Gokhale Institute. Some of the stalwarts of Indian economic policy making, B.M. Dandekar, Nilkant Rath, wrote an outstanding book on poverty in India, estimating for the first time the levels of poverty in India. J&K doesn't find a mention. Isn't J&K part of it? And till today, and the book must have come out sometime in the 70s, we still have a debate whether or not the level of poverty in J&K is what it is. Planning Commission says 4%, the state government says 25%. We still don't have a benchmark to go back in time and this is it. Never a part of it. Just look at, if you cast your net a little wider, the kind of work that's done. The finest work in Kashmiri music, done by a Polish scholar. The classic on Kashmiri carpets, done by an American. The encyclopedia on Kashmiri shawls, done by a Swiss. Grierson does the finest work on language in Kashmir, Kashmiri language, dedicates one full volume to it, among the 12 volumes, the Irish one. The folk literature, put together, researched, analysed by a Britisher. J&K was never a part of the British Empire. Land reforms. No Indian scholar finds it worthwhile. Alandi Jamri from Latin America writes about it. Fascinated by the experiment. Indian scholarship conspicuous by its absence. Why? Let's shift the focus away from government for a while and talk about where does the Indian society, origins of feudalism. As a student of economics, I remember huge debate on the mode of production in India. Spanned 20 years, scholars after scholars writing about it. D.D. Kosambi wrote one paper, somewhere in 1951, that the most unique form of feudalism in India through saffron cultivation was Kashmir, never followed up by anybody. Didn't even figure into these debates of feudalism, as if we didn't exist. The only casteless society in J&K in some way where the caste doesn't have a bearing on the occupational structures, to the point that a Brahmin does the trade of a shopkeeper. So there's a very unique way a society is organized, a social system is organized. Tomes of it written on Tamil Nadu, of how it influences, and series of it, yet nothing about Kashmir. The point I am trying to make is, sorry, that the Indian thinker, the academic, the policymaker, never engaged with J&K, its trials, its tribulations, its social evolution, and hence is unable to understand what is happening in J&K today. We have left it far too much for the government to decide this. And within government, a certain subset of government, which is either the army or the intelligence, largely put security force. There is no independent thinking, there is no, which would make you understand why people are reacting the way they are reacting. Why is there an issue rising in J&K? And we have seen this trouble for the last 40 years, not something that's happened happen today. And while a random slogan of secession and a green flag in the streets of Srinagar lights up the TV screens across the country, no one ever mentions this kind of complete apathy of the Indian civil society and what I call the mental secession of the Indian intellectual from the society of J&K. I find it utterly unbelievable that this doesn't get captured and this doesn't get addressed, because from the civil society point of view, and this brings me to a second point that I want to make, from the civil society point of view, the biggest concern today is the manner in which the politics in the state is being played out. And here, drawing from my political alienation point, I want to make the other point that today, as I see it, somebody working in J&K, being a part of government, it is not merely a political issue. And I'm talking about Kashmir. When I say Kashmir, I loosely mean J&K, but because the focus really is on the valley. That Kashmir is not merely a political issue, it's now a social issue. And in addressing this social issue, the civil society of India has a much larger role than the government of India. The government of India has its own compulsions, has its own policies, has its own institutional memory, has other issues to take care of in terms of how it gets addressed nationally, internationally, and so on and so forth. Foreign policy dimensions come in, but when you're looking at the evolution of, and the way this political problem has now gone into your social fabric, and how it is changing everything there, I think the civil society needs to take cognizance of it and would have a much bigger role to play in reclaiming what is being lost, because every single day some bit of the uniqueness of J&K, be it social, cultural, linguistic, historical, is being lost. And in reclaiming, as I said, and the loss of our own, and when I say of our own, I mean from a very value-centric perspective, the loss of our own Islamic heritage, a very unique blend of the Sufi Rishi kind of tradition, is a big loss to the cultural heritage of India, if not the subcontinent in the world. Because that is under threat every single day, and something will be lost. In fact, ironically, what resulted in this whole move of a political separatism, the basis of that is being undermined. And the government cannot address these issues where the civil society can. So to put it in a slightly more academic terms, that India as a nation, and not merely as a state, has to intervene, react and resolve. I think that's the key argument that I put forward, is that it's not about the state. That has its own various dimensions. India as a nation, and India civil society are more powerful in this regard than the Raisina Hills. And if you see how the people of J&K have reacted, you will see the semblance of hope in this. In terms of, never has there been an articulated position against the civil society of India. It's against the state. So in that sense, if you bring it to the federal paradigm, then at its most basic level, you would tend to see it as a federal issue, a center state, which is now getting articulated in different ways, has also got articulated in different ways, and got absorbed through various routes, whether it was the linguistic issue or other issues as may have happened in other parts of the country. So if you then bring it to that level, that it's a center and a state thing, which is where I'm saying that now that we're also moving towards a certain federalization of the country, it might be worthwhile to not look at J&K alone in its very specific segment and see it as a holding operation, but to see it, as I said in the first place, not as an aberration, but as a model, which probably at that time could not have been grafted on to the Indian system, as it were. But today, given the nature of change that have happened, how the notion of sovereignty has changed, which brings me to my last point, that maybe Kashmir is seen as a dissenting idea in the mainstream discourse and dialogue in its existence. That's a dissenting idea, an idea of an autonomous unit, of an empowered federal unit within the nation state of India. It may be seen as a dissenting idea, but its preservation is very important to retain democracy and diversity in India. I think it's not so much for any reason that if you want to retain both democracy and diversity, you need to see the Kashmir issue very differently. Ironically, no change, and this is where I think there is a methodological failure in trying to understand Jammu and Kashmir. In no change, whether it's political, economic, social, that has taken place in the country, has ever impacted our framework or perspective within which we seek to understand and analyze J&K. It's my big premise that the big failure in addressing Kashmir has been to see it in isolation of larger trends and changes that have taken place in our democracy, in our federalism, in our political structure, indeed in our social value system. I think we never related to those things. Maybe even ideological paradigms that have changed. Even global paradigms. Globally, the notion of sovereignty has changed. The notion of territoriality has changed. It has never informed the debate on J&K